A 17-year-old girl disappeared in the middle of the night. Her parents said she ran away. But when police searched their backyard, they uncovered a secret that shocked the entire town. And what her younger brother revealed later changed the whole story forever. In the quiet town of Meadow Creek, life moved slowly. The streets were narrow, lined with small houses painted in soft colors. Children played outside until sunset, and neighbors greeted each other every morning as if nothing bad could ever happen there. Most people believed Meadow Creek was a safe place, but sometimes the most dangerous secrets hide behind closed doors. 17-year-old Ayesha Khan lived in a small two-story house at the end of Willow Street. From the outside, her home looked peaceful. Clean windows, flower pots near the door, and a small tree growing in the yard. To outsiders, it looked like the home of a happy family. But inside, the air often felt heavy. Ayesha was known in school as a bright and kind student. She loved reading books about real-life mysteries and stories about brave women who followed their dreams. Her favorite place was the school library, where she could sit quietly for hours, turning pages and imagining a future far away from Meadow Creek. Her dream was simple. She wanted to become a journalist. She wanted to tell stories, uncover truth, and travel to places she had only seen in books. Her English teacher, Mrs. Farah, believed in her strongly. "One day, you will write stories that the whole world will read," she once told Ayesha with a proud smile. Those words stayed in Ayesha's heart. But every day after school, the moment she stepped inside her house, her dreams felt smaller. Her father, Rashid Khan, was a strict man who believed rules should never be questioned. He worked long hours at his small business and expected complete obedience from everyone in the family. In his mind, daughters did not need big dreams. They needed discipline. At dinner, Rashid usually spoke while everyone else stayed silent. "You must learn how to cook properly," he often told Ayesha. "A girl's real home is her husband's house." Ayesha would lower her eyes and nod quietly, even though her heart disagreed. Her mother, Shazia Khan, rarely spoke during these conversations. She moved silently around the kitchen, placing food on plates without making eye contact. Sometimes, Ayesha noticed sadness in her mother's eyes, a sadness that looked deep and old. It was the kind of sadness that came from years of silence. One afternoon, everything changed. Ayesha returned home from school feeling tired but excited. She had just received high marks on her latest exam, and she couldn't wait to share the news. But the moment she stepped inside, she sensed something unusual. The living room door was open. Inside, her father sat upright on the sofa, wearing his formal clothes, something he only did during important occasions. Next to him sat her mother, her hands tightly folded in her lap, and across from them sat a man Ayesha had never seen before. He looked older, much older than her. His hair was neatly combed, and his eyes watched her closely as she entered the room. Ayesha's footsteps slowed. Her heart began to pound. "Come here," Rashid said firmly. Ayesha walked forward slowly, full bag still hanging from her shoulder. "Yes, Baba?" she asked softly. Rashid cleared his throat. "Ayesha, this is Imran Malik," he said. "He is from a respected family." Imran gave her a small smile, a smile that made her feel uncomfortable for reasons she could not explain. Ayesha forced a polite nod. "Hello," she whispered. Then her father said words that felt like thunder crashing in her ears. "He is your future husband." For a moment, the world felt silent. Ayesha blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. "My husband," she repeated weakly. "Yes," Rashid replied calmly, as if discussing something normal. "The families have agreed. The wedding will take place soon." Ayesha's hands began to shake. She looked toward her mother, hoping for support, but Shadzia kept her eyes lowered. The stranger, Imran, leaned slightly forward. "You will be well taken care of," he said in a smooth voice. "You don't have to worry about anything." His words did not comfort her. Instead, they made her feel trapped. "I don't want to get married." Ayesha said suddenly. The room fell silent. Her father's expression changed instantly. What did you say? He asked slowly. Ayesha swallowed hard but forced herself to speak again. I want to study, she said, her voice trembling. I want to finish school first. Rashid's jaw tightened. Your studies are not more important than family honor, he replied sharply. Ayesha felt tears rising in her eyes. She turned toward her mother again. Ammi, please say something, she whispered, but Shadzia remained silent. That silence hurt more than her father's anger. Rashid stood up, his voice now louder. The decision is final, he said. You will marry him. There will be no more discussion. Imran smiled again, calm, confident, and strangely cold. Ayesha felt as if the walls around her were closing in. That night, she locked herself inside her room. She sat on her bed, holding her favorite book tightly against her chest. Tears rolled silently down her face as fear slowly filled her heart. She stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Her future, once bright and full of dreams, now felt dark and uncertain, but as the night grew deeper, something inside her changed. Fear slowly turned into determination. She wiped her tears and whispered to herself, I will not accept this. No matter what happened, she would fight for her freedom. She didn't know yet that this single decision, to refuse, would soon place her in terrible danger, and that the people she trusted the most would become the ones she feared the most. After the shocking announcement, life inside the Khan house changed overnight. The air felt heavier than before, as if fear had settled into every corner of the home. Rashid no longer spoke calmly. His voice now carried constant warning. Every small mistake Ayesha made felt like it could lead to another argument. The wedding preparations began immediately. Relatives started visiting the house, bringing gifts and offering congratulations. Some smiled at Ayesha warmly, while others whispered quietly among themselves. You're lucky, one aunt told her. Imran is wealthy. Many girls would dream of this match. But Ayesha didn't feel lucky. She felt trapped. Every night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining a future she didn't want, living with a stranger, leaving her books behind, giving up her dream of becoming a journalist. Her school had always been her escape. But now, even that place felt different. At school, Ayesha tried to act normal, but her best friend Sarah Ali noticed something was wrong immediately. You look tired, Sarah whispered during lunch. What happened? At first, Ayesha stayed silent. She feared someone might overhear. But after a moment, her emotions spilled out. They fixed my marriage, she said quietly. Sarah froze. What? Already Ayesha nodded, her eyes filling with tears. In 3 weeks, she added. Sarah leaned closer, lowering her voice. But you're only 17. You don't even know him. I told him I don't want to marry, Ayesha said, her voice shaking. But Baba said the decision is final. Sarah clenched her fists. That's not fair, she whispered angrily. For the first time, Ayesha allowed herself to speak her deepest fear. I feel like my life is ending, she admitted. Sarah stayed silent for a moment, thinking carefully. Then she asked a question that would change everything. Have you thought about leaving? Ayesha looked at her, surprised. Leaving how? Running away, Sarah said. The word felt dangerous, but also powerful. Ayesha hesitated, her heart beating faster. I don't know if I can, she said softly. But the idea stayed in her mind for the rest of the day. That evening, while sitting alone in her room, she remembered something important. Her cousin Nadia lived in the city, far from Meadow Creek. Nadia had once told her, if you ever need help, call me. With trembling hands, Ayesha took her phone and dialed Nadia's number. When Nadia answered, Ayesha's voice broke into tears. They want me to get married, she whispered. There was silence on the other end. Then Nadia spoke firmly. You don't have to do this, she said. If you can come here, I will help you. Those words gave Ayesha hope. The first real hope she had felt in days. That night, she made a decision. She would leave. Quietly. Without telling anyone. The next day at school, she shared the plan with Sarah. "I'm going to run away," she said in a low voice. Sarah's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" Ayesha nodded. "I'll leave before the wedding. I'll go to the city and stay with Nadia." Sarah looked nervous but supportive. "When will you go?" she asked. "Soon," Ayesha replied. "Before they take away my chance." But unknown to Ayesha, someone had already begun watching her closely. Her younger brother, Bilal, had noticed strange changes in her behavior. She spent more time alone, spoke softly on the phone, and locked her room door more often. One night, Bilal walked past her room and heard her whispering. "I'll come soon, please, wait for me," Ayesha said quietly into her phone. Bilal didn't understand everything, but he sensed something unusual, curious, and slightly afraid. He went to their father. "Baba," Bilal said hesitantly, "Ayesha is talking about going somewhere." Rashid's eyes narrowed instantly. "Going where?" he demanded. "I don't know," Bilal replied. But she sounded serious. That small conversation changed everything. The next morning, Rashid called Ayesha into the living room. His expression was cold and suspicious. "Are you planning to run away?" he asked suddenly. The question struck her like lightning. For a second, she couldn't breathe. "No," she replied quickly, forcing herself to stay calm. But Rashid didn't believe her. From that moment, his behavior became stricter than ever before. Ayesha was no longer allowed to go anywhere alone. Even simple things, like visiting neighbors or walking outside, were forbidden. And soon, the worst punishment came. "You will not go to school anymore," Rashid announced one evening. Ayesha felt her heart drop. "Why?" she asked desperately. "Because I said so," he replied sharply. Her books were taken away. Her phone was confiscated. The windows of her room were locked from the outside. She felt like a prisoner. Days passed slowly, each one heavier than the last. But deep inside, Ayesha refused to give up. She knew time was running out. Late one night, when the house was quiet and the lights were off, she sat on her bed with shaking hands. She pulled out a small cloth bag hidden beneath her mattress. Inside, she packed a few clothes, some money she had secretly saved, and her favorite notebook, the one filled with her dreams and ideas. Her heart pounded loudly in her chest. This was her only chance. She waited until she heard the sound of deep snoring from her parents' room. Slowly, carefully, she stood up. She walked toward the door, holding her small bag tightly. Tonight, she would try to escape. But what Ayesha didn't know was that someone inside the house was still awake. Watching. Listening. Waiting. The house was completely silent. It was the kind of silence that made every small sound feel louder than usual. The ticking of the clock in the hallway echoed through the darkness. Outside, the night air felt cold and still, as if the entire town of Meadow Creek was asleep. But inside the Khan house, Ayesha's heart was racing. It was nearly midnight. She sat on the edge of her bed, holding her small cloth bag tightly in her hands. Her fingers trembled as she listened carefully to the sounds around her. She could hear her father's loud snoring coming from the next room. Her mother's room was quiet. Everything seemed safe. This was her moment. Taking a deep breath, Ayesha slowly stood up. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to move. She walked quietly toward her bedroom door, trying not to make a single sound. The wooden floor creaked slightly under her foot. She froze instantly. Her heart pounded harder. She waited. No one moved. No one spoke. After a few seconds, she continued walking, slower than before. When she reached the door, she gently turned the handle. The metal felt cold in her hand. The door opened with a faint clicking sound. Ayesha stepped into the dark hallway. For a moment, she stood still, letting her eyes adjust to the darkness. Moonlight entered through the window at the end of the hallway, creating pale shadows on the walls. Her breath felt heavy. She walked past her parents' room, holding her bag close to her chest. Each step felt like it lasted forever. Inside her mind, she repeated the same thought again and again. Just reach the back door, just reach the back door. The kitchen was only a few steps away. When she entered the kitchen, she noticed something strange. The back door was already unlocked. Her heart jumped. She clearly remembered locking it earlier that evening. For a second, doubt filled her mind. Did someone open it? Or had she forgotten? She didn't have time to think. This was her chance. Slowly, she placed her hand on the door and pushed it open. Cool night air rushed inside, touching her face. Freedom. She stepped outside, feeling the cold ground beneath her feet. The backyard looked dark, with shadows covering the corners. She took one step forward. Then another. She could almost feel her future waiting beyond the gate. But suddenly, "Where do you think you're going?" The voice came from behind her. Cold, sharp, terrifying. Ayesha froze instantly. Her body refused to move. Slowly, she turned around. Standing in the doorway was her father, Rashid. His eyes burned with anger. Behind him stood her mother, Shazia. Her face looked pale and tense, her hands trembling slightly. Ayesha felt her breath disappear. I just wanted some fresh air," she whispered weakly. Rashid stepped forward, his footsteps heavy against the floor. "Fresh air with a bag?" he asked coldly. Ayesha clutched the bag tighter. Tears filled her eyes. "Please," she whispered, "I just want to live my life." Her voice broke as she spoke. "I don't want to marry him, please let me go." For a brief moment, silence filled the air. Then Rashid grabbed her arm tightly. His grip was painful. "You have shamed this family enough," he shouted angrily. Ayesha cried out in pain as he dragged her back into the house. "Let me go," she pleaded. "Please, Baba." But Rashid didn't listen. Her mother followed behind them, silent but shaking. Inside the house, the argument grew louder. Voices echoed through the walls. Neighbors later reported hearing shouting that night. Angry words mixed with desperate cries. Some heard Ayesha's voice clearly. "I don't want this marriage!" she screamed. Others heard Rashid yelling loudly. "You will obey!" The shouting continued for several minutes. Then came a loud crashing sound, as if something heavy had fallen. After that, silence. Complete silence. The next morning, the sun rose as usual over Meadow Creek. People stepped outside their homes, greeting neighbors, and beginning their daily routines. But inside the Khan house, something felt terribly wrong. Ayesha was gone. When relatives arrived later that day, Rashid calmly told them the story. "She ran away," he said coldly. Shazia stood beside him, her face pale, her eyes swollen as if she had been crying all night. "She left in the middle of the night," Rashid continued. "We tried to stop her, but she escaped." At first, people believed him. Some whispered that Ayesha had been stubborn. Others said she had embarrassed her family. But one person refused to believe the story. Sarah. When she heard the news, her heart sank. She knew Ayesha better than anyone. Ayesha would never leave without telling her. Never. Something felt terribly wrong. Without wasting time, Sarah went straight to the police station. Her hands trembled as she spoke to the officer on duty. "My friend is missing," she said urgently. "And I think something bad has happened to her." The officer listened carefully. His name was Officer Daniel Reed, a calm and experienced investigator known for noticing small details others ignored. At first, the case looked simple. Just another runaway teenager. But as Officer Reed listened to Sarah's story, a strange feeling settled in his mind. Something didn't fit. Something felt hidden. And soon, he would begin asking questions that the Khan family never expected. Questions that would slowly uncover a truth far darker than anyone imagined. Officer Daniel Reed had investigated many missing person cases before, but something about Ayesha's disappearance didn't feel right. At first glance, it looked like a simple runaway case. Teenagers sometimes left home when they were upset or scared. But Sarah's words stayed in his mind. "She would never leave without telling me." That sentence kept repeating in his thoughts. The next morning, Officer Reed drove to the Khan house. The sky above Meadow Creek was gray, and the air felt heavy. As he stepped out of his car, he noticed the house looked quiet. Too quiet. No sounds, no movement, just stillness. He knocked firmly on the front door. After a few seconds, the door opened. Rashid Khan stood there. His face looked calm, but his eyes seemed tired, as if he hadn't slept much. "Yes?" Rashid asked. "I'm Officer Reed." He replied politely. "I'm here to ask a few questions about your daughter." Rashid nodded slowly and allowed him inside. Inside the living room, everything looked neat and organized. Too organized. The cushions were perfectly placed, and the floor was spotless. Shadzia sat quietly on the sofa, her hands tightly clasped together. Her face looked pale, and dark circles rested beneath her eyes. Officer Reed took a seat across from them. "When did you last see Ayesha?" he asked calmly. "Last night." Rashid replied without hesitation. "She left while we were sleeping." Reed watched him carefully. "You didn't hear anything?" Rashid shook his head. "No. We woke up and found her gone." Officer Reed turned his attention to Shazia. "Did you notice anything unusual?" he asked gently. Shadzia opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. Finally, she whispered, "No, nothing." Her voice trembled slightly. That small detail caught Reed's attention. After a few more questions, he asked something unexpected. "May I take a look around the house?" Rashid hesitated for a brief second. But then he forced a polite smile. "Of course." Officer Reed began walking through the room slowly, observing everything. He checked Ayesha's bedroom first. The bed was neatly made. Too neatly made. Most teenagers left their rooms messy, especially if they ran away in a hurry. But here, everything looked arranged with care. He noticed something else. Ayesha's books were stacked neatly on the shelf, untouched. If she had planned to run away, she would have taken at least some of her belongings. That detail troubled him. Next, he walked into the kitchen. The back door stood closed. He touched the handle and noticed faint scratch marks near the lock, small, but noticeable. His suspicion grew stronger. Finally, he stepped outside into the backyard. The air smelled of damp soil. As he walked slowly across the yard, his eyes scanned every corner. Then he noticed something unusual. Near the far end of the yard, a patch of soil looked freshly disturbed. The ground there was darker than the rest. Officer Reed walked closer. The soil looked recently dug, not days or weeks ago, but very recently. Behind him, Rashid's voice suddenly spoke. "I planted a tree there," he said quickly. Reed turned around. "A tree?" he asked. "Yes," Rashid replied. "I was planning to grow one." Officer Reed looked back at the patch. There was no tree, not even a small plant, just bare soil. A cold feeling settled in his chest. He turned toward Rashid again. "Do you mind if we examine this area?" he asked calmly. Rashid's face stiffened. But before he could respond, Shazia let out a small gasp. Her hands began shaking. Within hours, officers arrived with digging tools. Neighbors gathered outside the Khan house, whispering nervously among themselves. Some watched silently, their faces filled with worry. The digging began. Each shovel pushed deeper into the soil. Minutes felt like hours. Officer Reed stood quietly, watching every movement. Then suddenly, one officer stopped. "Sir," he said in a low voice. Everyone froze. Something had been found. Slowly, carefully, the officers continued digging. And then, the truth surfaced. Inside the ground lay a body, wrapped in cloth. Officer Reed felt his chest tighten. He already knew who it was. The entire neighborhood fell silent as the cloth was uncovered. It was Ayesha, the same girl who had dreamed of becoming a journalist, now lying lifeless beneath the earth. Gasps echoed around the yard. Some neighbors began crying. Others turned away in shock. Officer Reed closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. But his job wasn't finished yet. He turned toward Rashid. "Explain this," he demanded firmly. Rashid stood frozen, unable to speak. His confident expression had disappeared completely. Then suddenly, Shadzia collapsed onto her knees. Tears poured down her face. I didn't mean for this to happen. She cried loudly. Her voice shook as fear finally broke her silence. Everyone watched in shock as she began to confess. It wasn't supposed to happen. She sobbed. He only wanted to scare her, but he lost control. According to her story, Rashid had grabbed Ayesha during the argument and strangled her in anger. When she stopped moving, panic filled the room. Instead of calling for help, they buried her in the backyard. They told everyone she ran away. They laid for days. For weeks. The town of Meadow Creek was left in disbelief. Parents hugged their children tightly that evening. Neighbors whispered about the tragedy, unable to understand how a father could kill his own daughter. But as Officer Reed listened carefully to Shazia's confession, something still felt wrong. Her words sounded incomplete, like part of the truth, but not all of it. There was still one witness who hadn't spoken fully. Bilal, the younger brother, and soon, his words would reveal a truth even darker than anyone expected. The discovery of Ayesha's body shocked the entire town of Meadow Creek. News spread quickly. Within hours, people gathered outside the Khan house, whispering to one another in disbelief. Some neighbors cried openly. Others stood in silence, unable to accept what had happened. A girl full of dreams, buried in her own backyard. Officer Daniel Reed stood near his car, reviewing the early reports. Shazia's confession had sounded emotional, but something about her story didn't feel complete. She had blamed Rashid alone, but Reed had learned long ago that in many cases, the truth hides beneath layers of fear and lies. And sometimes, the quietest people carry the darkest secrets. That evening, both Rashid and Shazia were taken to the police station for further questioning. They were placed in separate rooms to prevent them from influencing each other's statements. Reed began by questioning Rashid. Rashid sat stiffly in his chair, his face pale but stubborn. He avoided eye contact and spoke very little. "You buried your daughter," Reed said firmly. "That makes you responsible." Rashid remained silent. Then Reed mentioned Shazia's confession. "She said you lost control and strangled Ayesha," Reed added. Rashid finally looked up. "That's what happened," he muttered coldly. "She refused to listen. She dishonored us." His voice carried no sadness, only anger. That lack of emotion disturbed Reed deeply. After finishing with Rashid, Reed moved to the next room. Shazia sat alone, crying quietly. Her hands trembled as she wiped tears from her face. Reed spoke gently. "Tell me everything," he said. "Not just part of it." Shazia nodded weakly. "I tried to stop him," she whispered. "He was too angry. I was scared." Her voice sounded fragile, but Reed had learned not to trust emotions alone. He needed facts. That's when he remembered Bilal, the younger brother. During the earlier investigation, Bilal had stayed mostly silent. He avoided eye contact and clung to relatives whenever officers were nearby. Children often noticed details adults ignored, and sometimes, they carried truths that frightened them too much to share. The next morning, Reed requested to speak with Bilal privately. The boy sat in a small room at the station, holding a toy car tightly in his hands. His eyes looked tired, as if he hadn't slept all night. Reed sat across from him, keeping his voice calm and kind. "Bilal," he said softly, "I just need you to tell me what you saw." Bilal stayed silent at first. His fingers tightened around the toy. Reed waited patiently. After a long pause, Bilal finally spoke. "I heard them shouting," he whispered. Reed nodded. "What happened next?" Bilal swallowed nervously. Then he said words that changed everything. "I saw Mom first." Reed leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Bilal's voice shook as tears filled his eyes. "Ayesha was trying to leave," he explained slowly. "Baba was shouting, but Mom grabbed her first." Reed felt a chill run through his body. "Grabbed her how?" he asked gently. "From behind." Bilal replied. "She held her arms, so Baba could hit her." The room fell silent. Bilal continued, his voice trembling. "They both shouted at her. She kept crying, asking them to stop." Tears rolled down his cheeks. Then Baba held her neck. Bilal whispered, but Mom didn't let go. She kept holding her. Reed's mind raced. Shazia had claimed she tried to stop Rashid. But Bilal's story revealed the truth. She wasn't stopping him. She was helping him. When confronted with Bilal's statement later that day, Shazia's expression changed completely. Her tears stopped. Her face turned pale. "You lied," Reed said firmly. "You were involved." For a moment, she remained silent. Then her shoulders dropped, and the truth finally surfaced. "I was scared," she whispered weakly. "Scared of what people would say, scared of dishonor." Her voice trembled as she continued. "I thought if she refused, everyone would blame me. Say I failed as a mother." The fear had turned into anger. Anger had turned into violence. And violence had taken her daughter's life. Both parents were arrested and charged with murder. The case shocked not only Meadow Creek, but nearby towns as well. Newspapers called it one of the darkest crimes in the town's history. Neighbors struggled to understand how parents could harm their own child. In the weeks that followed, Ayesha's school held a memorial in her honor. Her empty desk remained in the classroom, decorated with flowers and candles. Students gathered silently, many wiping tears from their eyes. Her teacher, Mrs. Farah, spoke softly to the crowd. Ayesha wanted to tell stories, she said. She wanted to bring truth into the light. Those words stayed in the hearts of everyone who knew her. Months later, the town created a scholarship in Ayesha's name. It was meant to support young girls who wanted to continue their education, especially those who faced pressure to give up their dreams. Ayesha's dream lived on, even after her life ended. But the story left behind a haunting question. How could love turn into something so cruel? How could fear and control destroy a family from within? Officer Reed often thought about that case long after it ended. He remembered Ayesha's photo, her bright smile, her hopeful eyes. A girl who only wanted freedom. A girl who trusted her parents to protect her. Instead, they became the ones she needed protection from. And somewhere in the quiet streets of Meadow Creek, the memory of that night still lingered. A chilling reminder that, sometimes, the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people you trust the most.